Hello everyone, my name is SVP, talking on a KingBee, and today we're going to be going through the shortened version of the Pokemon Emerald Nuzlocke, which was my first ever Nuzlocke. So if you like the video, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, put a comment, and you can follow me on Twitter at SVPKingBee, or see me on Twitch at SVPKingBee. Links are in the description. So first thing we had to do was pick our first Pokemon. I used a random number generator to determine exactly which one, and it turned out to be a Mudkip, and we entered our first battle. We easily defeated the Zigzagoon, saved Professor Birch, and were soon able to nickname our Mudkip, who, after some consideration, I decided to call Slate. After we did that, we went up to battle May. May turned out to be not too bad of a battle, usually isn't, it's the very first battle that you have to do. Trico almost beat us, however, because of a couple of leers, and I believe I missed a tackle somewhere in the middle, so between the leers and the pounds, we managed to win just, but at least we got to the win. Following the defeat of May, we obtained some Pokeballs from her, and once we'd obtained the balls, we could then head up to our very first route, which is Route 101, and get our very first Pokemon. Turns out to be a Wurmple, so after a brief battle, couple of tackles and throwing a Pokeball, we had our first successful capture. After debating quite heavily for just a little while, I managed to finally come up with a nickname of Bee. No, although I will thematically do this throughout a lot of my playthroughs, I actually did not intend this because of KingBee. It came to my brain. Anyway, after moving along to Route 103, and unfortunately that's because we missed Route 102, don't worry, I'll come back eventually, we ran into a Poochyena. Once again, short battle, couple of tackles, throw a Pokeball, we managed to catch the Poochyena. I decided to nickname it Minnie after a lot of thought. At this point in the playthrough, I realised that I don't have a lot of ability to nickname. But that's okay, eventually I came across a bit of a theme and, slowly started to get it, but realistically, I'm not great at this. Anyway, after moving from there, we went along to Route 104. We did the whole Wally thing, met with our dad, had a chat, and found another Poochyena. I think you can see where this playthrough is going to go. We had so many options, and yet all we could find were the same Pokemon over again, and I'm not going to spoil anything just yet, but it definitely had the ability to, shall we say, ruin our day. At this point I decided that I wanted to name these Poochyena after the Martian, and I initially was going to call it Mark, and then I went, actually no, I should call it Watney, it sounds a bit better. If you're unfamiliar with the Martian, it's because of the rovers. I don't really want to explain it more than that, other than rover is a really common name for a dog. So, Watney. Moving on, I deposited our Poochyena because I didn't want to have two floating around in the team just yet. I believe people do their Nuzlockes with the team being what they've caught when they get up to 6, and they'll start doing it, but I decided to do this way. In Petalburg Woods, we found another Wurmple. Joy. Well, there's some joy. Well, look, we caught it anyway, and I decided that once again I would deposit the Wurmple. Having just one of each type of Pokemon felt like the right decision. I named her Pear. Why? Who the hell knows? At this point, I decided I was just making it up as I go along. I think I am going to try and discover themes for future playthroughs so that I'm not being that stupid in naming. Either way, I deposited the Wurmple and continued on. From here, we went all the way up to Route 116 and found ourselves our next encounter, which was another Poochyena. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Maybe I should have had a dupes clause. Well, I decided it was my first ever Nuzlocke. I decided two things. One, I didn't want to overcomplicate it, and two, I wanted to make it as easy, quote-unquote, as possible. So I just did the bare rules and did everything I could with what I had. I deposited that Poochyena, and I actually forgot to nickname it. It's okay. When we get to the name radar in Slateport City, we'll redo it then. Next up is our battle against Roxanne. I start out by sending Minnie, but only for the experience. I proceed to swap to Slate, and proceed to wreck up her team. Using Water Gun, I'd knock out Geodude in one hit. After Slate has grown up his next level, she sends out a second Geodude, which Slate destroys with one Water Gun. She sends out her Nose Pass, and I decide that Minnie requires a little bit more experience. So I swap it back in, and then proceed to immediately swap it back for Slate. Thankfully, Slate is using Special Attack with Water Gun, and therefore we won't be worried about her using Harden. It does block me in though, not that I was going to swap out again, and we don't do quite as much damage as I was hoping with Water Gun. so it ends up being a little bit of a grindy battle. She heals up with her berry and proceeds to tackle us. We hit it back with a critical water gun, but she heals up with a potion and we hit it again. After she healed up with a potion a second time, I decided to swap to Mud Slap to lower her accuracy, just in case she started tackling us and begin to give us some real trouble. She just kept hardening, and I eventually swapped back to Water Gun to give us the damage that we needed and ultimately knocked her out, winning us the first badge. Now we get to our very first death, and I hate to say it, it was our beloved Poochyena. I was absolutely gutted. It turns out, leaving a Poochyena in against a Machop is not a good move. Minnie, you sacrificed yourself for the good of the team, and I will always remember you. Of course, I had to immediately swap her out for the next Poochyena in the party, which was Watney. Welcome to the team, Watney. I am sure you will uphold the fine tradition that Minnie has already given us as a Poochyena. I rearranged my team so that I could switch train Watney and allow it to get some levels before we got to Rust Turf Tunnel. Once we were there, we obtained our next encounter, a Whismur. I let Watney fight on his own for a little while, figuring he could take a level 6 Whismur. Unfortunately, Uproar was hitting harder than I thought, but I did assume it would only do 7 damage the second time, and unfortunately I learnt what it cost to assume. Watney, my dear friend Watney, you will be avenged. I am so sorry. I went immediately back to the Pokemon Center and dropped off Watney. I run through those Poochyena quick, don't I? I decided that I shouldn't take along the other Poochyena as it was not yet nicknamed. After that, I went outside and decided to have a quick talk with May. Once we'd registered in the Pokénav, she decided that she wanted to have a battle. This should be an easy victory, and even though it's an optional rival fight, I really needed the levels. I sent out Bee against her Wingull, figuring she could use the most help. Using Confusion a few times to try to weaken it, we did get confused by a Supersonic, but we continued to break through, although occasionally hitting ourselves, to ultimately defeat it. Yet using Growl didn't have much of an effect as we were using a special attack and not a physical attack. As she sent out Trico, I used Poison Sting to try and defeat it. Unfortunately, him using Leer on me put me in a delicate position. However, I kept going with Poison Sting, ended up poisoning the Trico, which gave us a little bit of an advantage. Once I hit low enough health, I used a potion and let the poison do its work. All that I needed to do was give it one more good hit and it was going to go down. One more Poison Sting later and down went Trico, securing our victory over May. From here, I went back to Route 103 as I'd remembered we hadn't had an encounter and... oh look, a Poochyena. I am so lucky, I have obtained another Poochyena. Can you tell that I wasn't particularly happy about this one? Worse, it was harder to catch than it should have been. I wasn't able to weaken it because I was too over-leveled for the Pokemon at the time, though come to think of it, I could probably have withdrawn one of my weaker mons just to try to get it down. In the end, I was able to catch it, and decided to name it Vogel, after yet another character in The Martian. I was probably planning to name more things after Martian characters, but in the end decided not to. After this, I travelled down to Dooford Town. I managed to get a number of fishing encounters as there is a route above and to the right of Dooford, and Dooford Town itself has water on it. So, my first encounter was with the Tentacle. After battling the Tentacle and getting poisoned by it, I decided to switch Vogel out. Maybe I'm learning not to let my Poochyena die too early. I ultimately managed to catch it in a Great Ball and named it Deville. I mean, you know, Tentacruel, Cruella, Deville. It made sense to me anyway. After that, I went and did a number of other encounters. As I said, there were 2 more that I could do, so I went and did one in Dooford Town and fished myself up a Magikarp. Magikarp is a quick and easy battle because it only knows Splash, so Vogel could hold his own. It's a real shame that we don't get experience in this generation for battling Pokemon. It was a long battle as I wasn't doing all that much damage, but ultimately I ended up catching it and eventually decided on the name Finn. Have I mentioned I'm not good at nicknames? Anyway, once I'd caught Magikarp, nicknamed it Finn and moved along, we found our next encounter on the route above, which turned out to be, you guessed it, another Magikarp. It's not as bad as it seems, however. Magikarp does evolve into Gyarados, and Gyarados is a particularly powerful Pokemon for these kind of challenges. In saying that, we are talking about Generation 3, and there is a slight problem with this. Gyarados only learns a new move every 5 levels, and it doesn't learn any water moves, I don't think until Hydro Pump, which is a long way away. So it doesn't learn any flying moves or water moves, and therefore doesn't have any stab moves as it levels up. It's still a great Pokemon to have, but sometimes it can just be a little bit problematic as we go along. I named the Magikarp Marv. I didn't really have a reason, I just named it Marv. Then we did our Granite Cave encounter, and we managed to find the Zubat. Well, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. The Zubat had a bit of an issue with continuously confusing my Pokemon, which made it a little bit hard to catch. It did make this a long grind. I really wasn't looking forward to the team that I currently had. I didn't feel like we'd found a good variety of Pokemon at this stage, and I knew eventually that a lot of these Pokemon were going to have to be relegated to the sidelines as more Pokemon came in. And I do understand that that's part of the Nuzlocke, but I really was hoping to find something like an Aron that could have joined the party for a longer term. Bee would have eventually been put to the side, and a Zubat might be amazing as a Golbat, but until that time, we were probably going to be in Struggle City. I named the Zubat Jolene. I could start singing, but I don't want to get a copyright strike on the channel. After we'd caught and named Jolene, it was time to do a little bit of team sorting, so I went to the PC to give this a whirl. Now that I had 6 separate species of Pokemon, I was able to decide on a particular team, ultimately ending up with Zubat, Poochyena, Marshtomp, Dusclops, Tentacool, and Magikarp. After that, it was time to go for a little bit of grinding, and I did this off camera, and I ended up with my team sitting at around these levels. Obviously, this isn't the best and most ideal scenario that I could have gone for, but I just wanted to be kind of around where Brawly would be when I faced his gym. Next up, we start the battle with Brawly. He sends out his Machop and I lead with Deville, switching for Bee, because I figured, well, we're not going to leave a level 11 Pokemon in against Machop. Confusion is super effective and Machop begins on his bulk ups. I figure that I can knock it out relatively quickly, however I take a little bit of damage in the process and Brawly heals with a super potion. I decided to go with Gust instead of Confusion and a critical hit allowed me to land another Confusion and take it down. He follows up with his Meditite, which is level 16 as well. I switched to Slate just to give myself a little bit of advantage. Meditite starts bulking up, and ultimately Meditite is never really much of a challenge in these battles because even after it bulks up, it always uses Focus Punch. And Focus Punch is interrupted when you hit it with a damaging move. So I just continued sending Water Gun after Water Gun at Meditite, and even though he healed with a Super Potion, let's be honest, the death of his Meditite was inevitable. I swapped to Mudshot, which turns out to do a little bit more damage as it is a slightly higher base power, and killed Meditite with 2 hits. Finally, he sends out Makuhita, and it was around here that I realised I'd underestimated the level that Brawly would be at. Turns out he had a level 19 Pokemon. But that's okay, I ultimately figured we could still take him on. I sent out Bee and used Gust. Realising that Gust is a physical attack in this gen, I swapped to Confusion as psychic types are not, and it turns out that that did quite a bit of damage. I felt like I needed to heal to make sure that I could live his next attacks, and I healed a couple of times before using Confusion one last time to knock it out. Bee grew to level 17 and learned Protect, winning us the battle and getting us the Knuckle Badge. After that, we talked to Mr. Briny and travelled all the way to Slateport, and at the beach before Slateport Town, we had another encounter. I fished up another Tentacool. Well, I don't know what I expected, we were always going to get another duplicate Pokemon. I believe the old rod only picks up Tentacools and Magikarps. Either way, after letting Jolene have a bit of a go, and probably should have left her out there as it was a poison type already, I sent out Bee to try and do as minimal damage as I could, because Poison Sting is obviously a very low powered move, and this allowed us to weaken it enough to catch it without knocking it out. I didn't want to go into the long grind fest that using a Zubat was going to give us. I believe it took a couple of Pokeballs to catch this one. It starts getting annoying at this point and I really should buy more Great Balls. Anyway, we caught the Tentacool and we decided to name it Flip. Why? Once again, please don't question me on my nicknames. If you've got good ideas for nicknames, why not leave them in the comments below? It might help me to do some things in future playthroughs. We then went to the Name Raider, and the Poochyena that we hadn't yet named, we decided to name Rufus. I almost called it Rufus, but you know, rough. I make myself laugh at least, right? On our way to Morville City, we had our next encounter, which was with an Oddish. Around this time is where the Pokemon start to become more diverse in Generation 3, and I'm really grateful for this. Even though at the moment, if I was to take a bunch of fishing encounters, I probably wouldn't encounter any better water Pokemon, at least at this point I'm able to start catching something different. So Oddish is going to be a good Pokemon on this route. I kind of wish that I'd been able to find something like an Electrike, but for the purposes of this point in time, I just wanted another different Pokemon. Moving forward, it's going to be really helpful to be able to find something different, and to be honest, once we start heading up to the northern towns and start searching the northern routes, hopefully we can find some really good Pokemon to join our team. Oddish turns out to be a bit of a difficult battle actually. I'm watching it back now going, hang on, this was a long capture. I might have to shorten this for next time. I apologise for making you watch through a bit too much. Either way, Oddish ultimately... Oh, it's because it's got Absorb. Of course, that's what it is. Look, in the end, we managed to finally catch Oddish, and I decided to name it Evil P. A little bit of a play on Vileplume, just, rearranging the letters in the front of its name. Evil P was destined to become a new member of our team, and I decided to replace Tentacool. At this stage, I really started to think, do I really want 6 Pokemon in the party? I know that's a general Nuzlocke thing that people do, like have a full team for as long as possible. However, I was really debating it because it was very hard to keep all of these Pokemon at a decent enough level, and it was very clear that some were going to be left behind. To prove the point, when I tried to use Jolene against an Aron, he critically hit me in Headbutt. Well, that put me in a delicate position. I decided to simply deposit Jolene into the dead box, and Jolene, Watney, Minnie, you have all done an excellent job, and I will avenge your deaths. Next up is the battle with May. I sent out Evil P, but immediately switched her for Slate because there was no way she was ready for battle. Slate was confused, but I still decided to try and power through, Slate at this point being powerful enough to really take on anything. We managed to avoid confusion and tackle Wingull a few times before breaking out and defeating it for the win. May then sent out Grovyle. I was not stupid enough to keep in Slate, it was going to be an instant death, so I sent out B in the hope that I could use Gust to finish it off. Thankfully, it really was quite an effective move, and even though Grovyle was using Pursuit against me a fair bit, 3 Gusts were all it took to take it out. May sent out her final Pokemon, the Slugma, and I immediately swapped back to Slate because once again, I'm starting to learn people. At this point, I was becoming a lot more comfortable with the Nuzlocke because really I've never done one before, and I can't stress that enough. Having never done a Nuzlocke before, I was going to have a hard time. Even though the Slugma put us to sleep, a couple of mud shots gave us the win. And then we come to a sad moment. Once I swapped in Vogel in a double battle, I went to try and take out these 2 Pokemon. Unfortunately, between them doubling up on Vogel, we lost another team member. Have I mentioned that I've turned around my decisions on Poochyena? 3 of them have died very easily. I was a lot less interested in having a Poochyena in the party at the moment. Either way, deciding not to replace anyone, I continued on with 4 Pokemon and challenged Watson. He sent out his Voltorb, and I began the journey with Slate. I felt like there was no chance at all that I would have any problems in this gym. Let's be honest, Slate being a ground type, Marshtomp being a ground type at this point, was always going to give us an advantage. I easily took care of his Voltorb and Electrike before moving on to his 3rd Pokemon, Magneton. Magneton can sometimes be a bit difficult, but it turns out 1 Mud Shot is all it takes to kill it. During the battle, Evil P grew to level 18 and learned Sleep Powder. Hey, I can't help it, I just rather like that he gets to learn some moves, and I made a small error. I accidentally got rid of its only stab move. Even if it was Absorb, that was a bit annoying. Still, Manectric had no chance against Slate, and I used a couple of Mud Shots. Even after it healed, it still fainted in just 2 attacks, winning us the Dynamo badge. I didn't want this video to go more than 40 minutes long, so unfortunately I'm going to have to cut this one here. Tune in tomorrow for the next video. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is SVP, talking on a King Bee, and I'm buzzing off. Catch you next time.